Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that you're all having a great day. It is Thursday night, at least here in the United States. For a lot of people, it's also Friday, which means we are rolling right into the weekend here. I hope that you're safe. I hope that your family is safe, and of course your friends are safe. And if they're not, I hope they're able to get that safety and security here soon. And we have a lot of stuff going on today, a lot of stuff internationally. Ukraine was, for the most part, a little quiet today, unfortunately. But there were some very interesting developments, and we're going to lead right in here with our top story. But before we do, and before we get into that, please remember that this war is affecting millions of people. 2/3 of Ukraine's children have actually had to flee the country. Of course, with them, many of their mothers, the men, were not permitted to leave. Because they were possibly going to have to be called up to fight this war. But there's also millions of other people outside of Ukraine that also need your help. For instance, they're in Ethiopia and Somalia, and of course in Southeast Asia as well, as they recover from Super Typhoon Rai. And so we cannot forget these places. Children, especially under the age of 5, are affected in Ethiopia and Somalia, and they're going to feel the effects of the droughts and the ongoing, unfortunately, lack of humanitarian aid going there, because a lot of it did have to be diverted there to Ukraine for emergency response to that crisis. And so please check out the description below. We have donation links that we have vetted for all of those locations. Upwards of 80% of your donations do go directly to their programs and helping the people in need. So we want to be able to be the news that gives back, but we can only do that with your help and the community's help. So please spread the word. Let your friends know. Of course, come and get some independent news. Get away from some of those mainstream news topics there and help people around the world while doing so. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the leading story today. And that's because we're talking about more atrocities in Ukraine. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean more atrocities themselves. Every single day is an atrocity in this country. But more evidence of it, and very damning evidence at that. And we see that up here, of course, in Bucha to begin with. And we've seen this before, but the unfortunate fact of the matter is no matter how much work you do, you will miss something. And that appears to be the case here. We know that as Russian forces were leaving the areas in the northern parts of the Kyiv Oblast, they basically booby-trapped everything. They put mines everywhere. They left hand grenades inside of glasses, so that way when you try to pull the hand grenade out, the actually spoon that actually flies off and it detonates. We've seen them hide hand grenades in between drawers, so when you open the drawer, it goes off. We've seen them do all sorts of things. And Ukrainian EOD, our favorite dog, Patron, also known as Cartridge, has gone through with a fine tooth and comb and tried to clear out all of this stuff. But unfortunately, it's not always possible, and things do get missed. Such as what we see here. This is the family's piano prior to the war, and that is what they found on the inside. That is a Russian mine on the inside of the piano. So when you play the piano, it will end up striking the mine and detonating it. So that is terribly unfortunate. That is absolutely terrible. And it's stuff like this that means it's gonna, you can't get it all. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much money you sink into it, you can't get it all. The amount of EOD teams and combat engineers in Afghanistan and Iraq were absolutely insane, and there's so many IEDs in Iraq that are left behind that no one ever found, that they're literally paving roads over it. It's cheaper to pave the roads than try to find them all. It is easier to just pave the roads over them in Afghanistan than just find them all. And so people are going to be finding this stuff for years to come. This will impact this area for the next months, days, weeks, months, and years, and possibly even decades, because the amount of just unexploded ordnance, let alone what was purposely placed, is just astronomical. It's going to be, you could sink billions of dollars just into cleaning up the regions in this area after the fighting is over, let alone the reconstruction efforts. And so people are going to unfortunately be injured because of that. But that's not the only thing. This is a little graphic, so I do want to advise everyone very upfront, but this is important to show, and I think that it is always going to be important to show this. This is actually coming from CNN, and that's because CNN today released footage of, they say, possible Russian war crimes because you are innocent until proven guilty, but I don't know how else I would describe this. We do have a Ukrainian bias here on the channel. This is one of our openly labeled biases here. Everything else we try and stay as central on point as possible. But CCTV cameras in parts of the Kyiv Oblast were obtained by CNN that show 2 Russian soldiers during the occupation shooting 2 unarmed civilian Ukrainians. And we do have that footage here. Once again, please be advised it is a little bit more graphic than what we would normally show, but it is important to show. So let's take a look.
War crime perpetrated by Russian forces. An example the world has not yet seen. Russian soldiers shooting 2 civilians in the back. CNN obtained the surveillance video taken from the...
There it is, folks. In case there were any doubts in your mind as to what was happening in this region during occupation, I don't know how there's no words that I can be used to describe in any better detail. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then video is priceless. And as we continue down, we actually found out today that an oil refinery here in Kremenchuk was actually hit by Russian missiles. Roughly 8 to 12 Russian missiles struck the refinery. And this comes as Russia is continually trying to cripple Ukraine's ability to actually continue to effectively employ its forces and continue the war on their side. Part of that is making sure that they don't have the infrastructure capacity in the industrial capacity to wage war. Of course, that's not going to matter much considering most of their stuff is NATO now, and they're getting supplied by NATO and NATO-aligned countries, and about every single country in the world that doesn't have some kind of a direct interest or involvement with Russia. And this is something that we're probably going to see a lot more of those, I'd say, more terror attacks on the Russian side, where they're using ballistic missiles to actually strike civilian populaces and spread fear more than anything, because we're seeing the Russians their invasion being reversed. But we do have some images coming out of here regarding that. So that is the oil refinery. And as you can see, it was hit several times over. But interesting developments, because they are losing ground. The Russians are losing ground. I dare say losing more than they are gaining at this point. The invasion is starting to become a reversal. And we see that just up in Kharkiv, where the Russians are essentially in full retreat from all evidence that we have seen. There is still fighting. I will not say that there is not still fighting. There is still fighting. But the Russian forces, we've seen the Chechens leave out of the Kharkiv Oblast already, and we know that they were there and operating in that region. They're headed back to Chechnya. They ain't doing it anymore. And we saw them on their way in the Belgorod Oblast in Russia. And with the reports we're seeing massive gains by Ukrainian forces in the Kharkiv Oblast area. And we don't see major gains by the Russians anywhere near here. There were certain media channels reporting that Severodonetsk was completely encircled today. That is not the case from all the evidence that we see. In fact, we know from what evidence we see, we know that they attempted to encircle Severodonetsk and they failed. And the reason why is because, once again, they tried to build a pontoon bridge and it was blown up. 73 vehicles reportedly on both sides of the river, either destroyed or abandoned. And we have a couple of different interesting things regarding this, but let's take a look here. So these are the photos. They're identifying different vehicles, sunk in the river on both sides. So if they got across the river, they're on the Ukrainian side. That thing gets blown up, there's no way back. You're not just driving across this river. And so this is the mazir-i-sharif river that they've been trying to cross, and they've tried multiple times to build a pontoon bridge to cross this thing. Not going very well for them. And apparently they tried it again while we were looking for more evidence. Apparently it happened again. You see they tried to cross there yet once more. And reportedly, this is coming from a Ukrainian EOD soldier who is there reportedly operating in the Mazir-i-sharif. And this was actually sent in by one of the members of our community. Our community, the people in our community are just awesome. They post a lot of stuff. And I found this particularly interesting considering some of the news that came out today regarding this. And he reportedly assisted in the detonation of this bridge and the destruction of the Russian forces that were trying to push onto Belorivka and conduct this encirclement of Severodonetsk. So, let's go ahead and go through here. He's got multiple posts. We're not going to go straight through them, but he made a complete thread where he is going through and saying, okay, starting on the 6th, he was, working with reconnaissance forces, trying to figure out, okay, this is where they're most likely going to need to put a bridge. Each section is about 10 meters long. They need about 8 sections. The current is too fast. They're going to need actual river boats to put this stuff in. And he goes through and he's talking about, hey, this is where we were, screwing these guys up, and this is how he did it, essentially. And he kind of goes through some of his kit. And he has posted about him actually being there. So, very interesting things, very interesting stuff indeed. But I'm not going to read through the entire thread here on the channel. But if you want to check it out, it's actually on our Discord. Once again, one of our community members actually posted that in the Ukraine media section. So, go check it out. And over here, we can actually see something that's been very interesting as a development today when it comes to the intelligence field. And that's because you've seen intelligence gathering from social media, satellite footage, air reconnaissance, ground reconnaissance, photographs, basic reports, troops reporting, when they're in contact, where they're spotting these guys. And now we have roaming SIM cards. This is something that somebody put together here where they went through and they checked the roaming data of the SIM cards that are Russian. Meaning any Russian soldier that has a cell phone that has their roaming data turned on right now is giving away their positions, and this now can show the troop concentrations of Russian forces inside of Ukraine. So you can see they applied a heat map to it. This is absolutely fascinating because this is the kind of this is not something that would have been available, 20 years ago. Even this is something that only developed with the development of the SIM cards and the smartphone and everything else, where you're allowed to have this roaming data. This is not anything. This is realistically, when it comes to warfare, this is a newer concept, much like a lot of the concepts that are in the lessons being taken away from this war, because really the last major wars that were fought were between extremely one-sided opponents. I'm talking about the wars in the Middle East. I'm talking about counterinsurgency operations globally. We haven't really seen a war between two modern combatants that are very well equipped and that are, larger powers, industrial first world nations going head to head. It's always been the last major war really before this was actually the U.S. and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And Iraq was was very far from being a very well developed. They had a large military. It doesn't necessarily mean they had very good military equipment to boot. A lot of developments today out of the Azovstal, and this is because Russian forces actually managed to push into the Azovstal today. They actually captured several buildings along the outside region of that perimeter. However, by earlier tonight, the Ukrainian forces had counterattacked on those positions and pushed the Russians back out of the compound. And this is coming at the same time as Turkey has currently offered to actually go take one ship. It can carry 2,000 people aboard it. They'll go take the last of the Ukrainians out of the Azovstal and take them to Turkey and keep them in Turkey until the war is over. The Russians denied this, according to a Ukrainian negotiator. So Russia has denied for them to do this. They still have yet to officially respond to Ukraine's offer of POWs for the wounded out of the Azovstal. So that is something that still has yet to be finalized, if they are actually going to be doing it, if they're going to deny, if they're going to whatever. We've seen several exchanges before, and hopefully they can continue to do that, and hopefully at least some of the fighters can come out of the Azovstal and get the medical treatment they desperately need. But we can go ahead and take a look here.
Все, забирай РПГ. Все, выдвигаемся.
So as you can see, that's going to be very historic footage. The footage that we're getting out of Mariupol, the stuff that's occurred in Mariupol, is going to be written about for probably till the end of time. Just because what's happened in Mariupol is not only just so tragic, but the level of resistance that the Azov battalions and the Marine battalions and the Ukrainian forces in general have put up in Mariupol is really the thing of legends are made out of. I mean, when do you think of, other instances where this has occurred, where battles like this have occurred, and you still hear about them today? You know them by name. Places such as, if you're American, the Alamo or Bastogne during World War II. For instance, you're talking about Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad, for those that work or that are from more probably from Europe and former Soviet bloc countries. And many others throughout history. Many others throughout history. I mean, there are just too many to name. But that's not the only footage we have. We have additional footage here today of just some of that bombardments that continue to hit. I mean, every day, day in and day out, they are dropping an insane amount of munitions on the Azovstal. Just the Azovstal. I mean, the rest of Mariupol probably couldn't be destroyed any more than it already is. I mean, what are you going to turn the rubble into dust? I mean, it's kind of pointless to do that. But there's at least guys to still shoot at for the Russians inside the Azovstal, and they are shooting everything they got at this place. This is still tying up Russian troops. Some have moved on to other parts of the front and are probably already combat ineffective by the Ukrainian artillery there. But the fighting going on at the Azovstal, that still requires thousands of troops, let alone the occupational force that has to be there. Thousands of troops just to try, and they still can't even really push into this place. They pushed into it one time that we know of, and they've been pushed out. And that's the only semi-successful attempt they've had thus far. And that was today. So let's take a look here. And you can hear that distinct whistle as those rounds come in. That is a real thing, and it gives me chills every time I hear it. I can't stand that sound personally, but there we are, resting with a friend from inside the Azovstal today. Everyone's got pets and animals in a war zone are amazing as a morale booster. Let me tell you, they are amazing as a morale booster. I got photos of me with dogs and stuff when I was in Syria that we made homemade bandanas, and we made them like mascots while we were there for each of our platoons and stuff. Yeah, dogs are a really amazing morale booster when you're in a terrible situation, and I can't imagine that these guys are any different. I mean, who can't come back to a dog or a cat and after a long day and going through some really terrible stuff and see it happy to see you and not feel at least a little bit better after everything going on? Maybe not, a huge amount, but at least something. You have to make the best of what little things you have. You have to, you have to make the best of what you got, no matter the situation. And that is what we've seen time and time again inside of Mariupol, coming from the Ukrainians, and we continue to see that. And here is that message that we were hearing about regarding the offer from Turkey. So we can't entirely confirm that this has occurred, but it wouldn't be surprising. There's been several offers by many different groups, including the Pope, for rescuing, for getting those Ukrainians out of Mariupol, and doing it in a way that it wouldn't allow for them to return to fighting for Ukraine, but it also wouldn't leave them to die in the Azovstal, or go into or become POWs. If the Russians even get to that point. And more rumors continue to fly in Ukraine. And this is something that I'm going to be very careful about how I word this, because I do not want this to be stated as a fact. And that is because there are reports that a Russian ship is on fire near Snake Island. Specifically, the Vysvolod Bobrov. I'm sorry if I butchered that. It's a Russian logistical support ship. There's actually a photo of it here. So this is the ship itself. It is reportedly on fire. It has also been reported it may have been hit by a Neptune anti-ship missile off of Snake Island while delivering anti-air defenses to the Russian troops on Snake Island. Keep in mind, Snake Island has been bombarded by the Ukrainian Air Force and Ukrainian drones for about a week now, week and a half. and especially over the last couple of days. So first thing they targeted, and we put that on here, was they targeted their air defense systems. Now this ship is reportedly been hit attempting to deliver fresh ones and resupply the forces there. Once again, we are not going to confirm this, and we're not going to say that this is fact whatsoever. And the reason why is because widely reported last time, less than a week ago, was the fact that the Admiral Makarov, which is a frigate in the Black Sea Fleet, was also hit by Neptune missiles and was on fire or was sunk. And that was disproven because we have both satellite images, and now we've also seen actual images as it returned into port undamaged in Sevastopol. So we do know that the Admiral Makarov, that was a false reporting, and that was very widely reported. A lot of people rallied behind that, much like they rallied behind when Ukraine did, in fact, sink the Moskva. So we are bringing the attention that this may be a thing. Once again, similar to how we said about the Admiral Makarov, we are not going to conclude this. We're not going to conclude that this has actually happened. There's not enough evidence to say anything about it as to happening or not. Once again, there's a photo of it. And we're just hearing from different sources that it has occurred. But once again, until we see proof, we're not going to falsely report something to you guys. So just so you're aware, as the news develops over the next couple of days and as more information comes out, that may be a thing. And it would not be surprising considering the operations in and around Snake Island by Ukraine. But that is all of the news inside of Ukraine. There's plenty of stuff outside. There's a lot that has to do with actually international information in Europe and the changing political situation there as Russia continues. And the first thing we have is actually here in Russia where Igor Girkin lost it on camera. He was conducting a stream that's watched by thousands of Russians, and he lost it regarding the military catastrophe that is the war in Ukraine for Russia, and calling for Putin to investigate his staff before it's too late. And keep in mind, Girkin, he's a key player. This guy is very pro-Russian. This guy is very pro what Russia is doing. He is reportedly the person that is behind when Malaysia Airline Flight 17 was shot down in Ukraine. Back, I believe that was in 2014. He is a key player regarding the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And he's also made calls during this war for the general mobilization and to actually put Russia into total war with Ukraine. He is calling for that stuff, but he has lost it. He has had it with I believe it's Shoigu, the head of the Russian military. And yeah, so we actually have a video here. Let's go ahead and watch.
Покажите голову того, кто дал вам абсолютно ложную информацию о ситуации на Украине, благодаря которой вы просрали золотые дни, когда действительно, как сказал Евгений Эдуардович, мог быть осуществлен блицкриг, и который вы не совершили именно потому, что у вас было абсолютно ложное представление об оперативной обстановке на Украине. Голову покажите, одну хотя бы. Вот с этого надо начинать, с кадров. Не начнете, война будет проиграна. Я знаю, что значительную часть нашего руководства, в том числе не исключаю, что и лично министра обороны Российской Федерации, эта ситуация устроит. Я прямо обвиняю Сергея Кужельгедовича Шойгу как минимум в преступной халатности. В предательстве у меня нет возможности его обвинить, но я бы ее заподозрил.
And so someone in the community was nice enough to actually translate that for the wider world, and we did verify this, and that is, show me the head of the one who gave you the completely false information about the situation in Ukraine, thanks to which you've wasted the golden days, quote unquote, of the Evgeny Edwardovich as Evgeny Edwardovich said, when truly there could have been a blitzkrieg, which you didn't do exactly because you had an absolutely false impression of the operational situation in Ukraine. Show me the head, at least one. This is what is necessary to start with staff. If you don't, the war will be lost. I know that the majority of our command, including possibly the Ministers of Defense of the Russian Federation, this situation suits them. I directly accuse Shoigu with at least of criminal negligence. I have no option of accusing him of treason, but I would suspect it. So he lost it, and this is a Russian hardliner. He lost it there, and we don't know what the repercussions may be, considering he has been a key player for Russia before. But this is also the kind of suspicions that we believe that Putin may have about his own staff anyway. Keep in mind, Putin, while maybe crazy, isn't stupid. I wouldn't put it that far. He's crazy. He's batshit crazy, but I wouldn't say he's stupid. Because he was a very successful officer in the KGB. He was not a spy, regardless of what the rumors are. He was a KGB officer, and he oversaw the political situation in East Germany, and he was very successful with that. He had a very successful career with it. Part of the reason for his nostalgia for the Soviet Union, and why he says it's the greatest tragedy of the 20th century, despite literally everything else that happened in the 20th century, to include the Holocaust. But that is probably something he's already suspected. We've seen him arrest and fire generals and officers, and we thought for a long time that Shoigu was actually been killed off by Putin because he had just gone missing, and he no longer shows up in his military attire. He shows up in a civilian suit and tie. So there's been a little bit of change. And as we drop down here over to Kosovo, right next to Serbia, we see that Kosovo is planning to actually apply for the Council of Europe. Now, what this is this comes as there's already a security kind of situation. So you have Kosovo and Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. None of these places like each other. I mean, that was a huge thing in the 80s. If you've ever seen the movie Behind Enemy Lines, that is the whole thing there is actually based on an event. It's by no means a true story. That the movie is 100% a, how do I say this? It's Hollywood at its finest, I should say. But Kosovo, Serbia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina did have kind of an issue in the 80s that led to an American pilot actually being shot down there. And Serbia and Kosovo definitely don't like each other. Serbia is actually Russian-backed. We've seen Chinese aircraft and Russian aircraft in Serbia before. And Kosovo announcing this, the Serbia's president responded saying, "The day we find out that they have officially applied for membership in an organization, our response will be much stronger than they think and will not be just a statement to the media. Believe me, we will show you our teeth." So that is a very ominous message for these neighboring countries, because this is already a problem. This is already a huge concern as a conflict region. I mean, what peace and stability is in this region already is very, very fragile. Very fragile. So, once again, while they are planning to apply, we don't know if they will. But it will get a very sharp reaction should they do it, from the sounds of it. So, that is just coming from the sources we have regarding this. A couple of different things regarding the Balkan insights and whatnot. But, yeah, that is the current situation there in the Balkans. And if you've ever listened to about Christmas time, Carol of the Bells by the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, the other name for that is Christmas in Sarajevo from the conflict. So, Slovenia here actually had a very powerful explosion in Kokevje. which is there in Slovenia. It was a powerful explosion in a chemical plant that has about 20 victims thus far. And this blast wave actually shattered windows of nearby houses. And just out of urgency regarding the situation, locals are being told to stay at least 500 meters away and stay away from windows and don't go outside. Once again, it's a chemical plant. We're not quite sure what kind of chemicals are being either produced or are being refined in this plant, but it is obviously a hazard to the public if something like this does occur. So, rather large fire following that. Boris Johnson made some remarks regarding the relationship between the United Kingdom and Russia today, reportedly, and the Prime Minister of the UK stated that the relationship between Russia and the West is beyond repair, and he stated that Russia's war, or that Putin specifically, says he's guilty of an absolutely barbaric onslaught on a totally innocent country. And this is coming from one of our sources here regarding that. So, very interesting, very choice words, I should say, coming from the UK Prime Minister. But the sentiment is felt region-wide. I mean, you can't not look at the situation going on here. You can't look at what's happening and the images coming out and the news coming out, coming from so many different international organizations, not just NATO, but places such as the European Union, which, I mean, they have to import energy from Russia, so it's not in their interest to necessarily put that at risk currently. And, of course, the United Nations. That is 193 sovereign countries that are overwhelmingly looking at the evidence and saying, this isn't good. This is Russia 100% attacking a sovereign nation. And there are very few people that are actually on the Russian side in this, most notably Belarus. Most others, based off of their political interests for their own countries, don't back Russia, but they don't openly support the endeavors in the United Nations for them, and instead they choose to abstain, which allows a lot of these votes to pass through in the United Nations summits. But when talking about these international organizations, we can't forget about Finland, who today officially announced its intent to join NATO and do it without delay. And that is the official word from the Finnish government. They are officially today, high-level government officials are coming out and officially saying, hey, we're going to join NATO. They've been seeking for some time now, and really the only delays they had thus far is the fact that should they actually seek to do it, they have security concerns. And they've been talking with other foreign officials within the NATO alliance about getting some security guarantees in the intermediate time between their official application, which will be coming in later this week, and between the time that they're officially accepted into NATO. Should that occur, they will be the 31st country in NATO, and it is believed that both Finland and Sweden will be doing this as a semi-joint effort, as they both are currently thinking about joining the NATO alliance. They're currently participating in Aero 22, which is the large-scale military exercise, and both countries are NATO partners. They are not part of NATO, but they do closely coordinate with NATO as is, and already it would not take that much of a step further for them to currently join that alliance. In the most recent poll of this last week has support flipping from a 20% support for joining NATO among Finns prior to the war to a 77%. So in a matter of weeks at this point, the entire opinion of the nation has changed regarding what their security interests lie. And we do have a couple of different sources reporting on this. First of all, Ukraine World. And second, we have here the OSINT Defender. And this is something that the aggression from Russia is not unfounded, obviously. If Finland does join NATO, that doubles the entire line of possible contact. It doubles the border between NATO countries and Russia directly, which is exactly the opposite of what Putin wanted. And he has voiced he has said that there will be consequences, and unconfirmed reports here are saying that they are inspecting nuclear shelters and bomb shelters across the country. They have a very extensive network for this. Finland is probably one of the more prepared countries in Europe for a war with Russia. They did it before. They will do it again if need be. And as we jump down here into Turkey, we can see the Chechens are equally not as happy. And that's because Chechens who fled Chechnya, specifically areas such as Grozny, during the First and the Second Chechen Wars, most of them found their new lives in Turkey. And this is because Georgia was still just a little close for comfort, and Armenia and Azerbaijan already have hostilities between them and have for a while. So they made their way to Turkey, and they actually lynched a former chief of police for Gikolovsky, which is in Chechnya. The individual's name is Adil Beslan, and they lynched him on May the 9th, reportedly as part of their annual message to Kadyrov, who is in charge of Chechnya currently. He is a pro-Russian leader in Chechnya, and he is part of what was the minority, the Kadyrovites. Kadyrov, the Kadyrovites, those Chechens who support Kadyrov and pro-Russian sentiments and being part of Russia. Because Kadyrov, I believe his father, fought against the Russians. And Grozny was very much like Mariupol. The wars in Chechnya were absolutely horrific and probably should not be forgotten, considering the parallels between what's going on there and what's going on in Ukraine. The difference was Chechnya is part of the Russian Federation. And as we start to move here into the Middle East, we first start off, of course, in Egypt, right there at the border, right there as technically part of Africa, but the Sinai Peninsula really starts to get into the Middle East here. And Egypt says it has killed 16 Islamic State fighters during an operation in the Sinai Peninsula between May the 7th and May the 11th. So this is part of operations in the northern part. They're deploying Apache helicopters in this region. They're conducting airstrikes. They're conducting strikes with ground forces. During the skirmish by the militants, 5 soldiers were killed and 2 more were injured. That is something that we had reported on yesterday. So finally, we have a little bit of an update and a follow-up with what's been going on there. And so a lot of stuff going on there in the Sinai Peninsula as they continue to combat ISIS in the region.
أسفرت عن تدمير عدد من البؤر الإرهابية.
Looks like they're just having a bunch of gun footage from the Apache helicopter. So very interesting stuff. There is a lot of good gun footage of counterinsurgency operations on YouTube if you guys want to check it out on some of other channels. But we're going to go ahead and move on. That's because in Iraq right now, the possibility of a famine grows. So Iraq is currently going through a drought. There's a lot of regions going through a drought right now, such as Somalia, Ethiopia, and now Iraq. And we've actually seen the Tigris the water level has kind of gone down to historic lows, despite being one of those, one of the beginning, locations of really civilization. This region is not without issues when it comes to food and water insecurities. And on top of that, political strife really doesn't help at all. But partially because of the lack of the wheat harvest in Ukraine, and on top of that, the lack of a wheat harvest caused by this abnormal drought, there is the large threat of famine. The inability, it's not the fact that Ukraine wasn't able to have a grain harvest, though a lot of grain is being stolen in the Russian occupied zones right now. We know there's like 270 tons of it, or something like that, is currently sitting in Syria on board a container ship that turned its transponder off. But it's also the fact that what grain is still in Ukrainian territory. The port of Odessa, which is the largest port in Ukraine, is currently being blocked. It's being blockaded by the Black Sea Fleet, meaning they can't ship this stuff out using the normal routes. And that's currently something that Europe's working on, because Ukraine is best known for being, or one of the best things that are known for is being the breadbasket of Europe. So a lot of grain comes out of here. A lot of food products come out of here. And without that, a lot of this stuff goes, Ukrainian grain is what's going to humanitarian aid missions worldwide, to countries with food insecurities. It's going for sale in places such as, the rest of Europe, the United States, all places in the globe. This is why food prices are increasing, because grain is used for everything. I mean, think of your bread, beer. Think you need flour, you need any of that stuff. I mean, just think about it. Think of what all grain goes into. Feed for cattle and for all different types of animals that you have. A lot of that is grain. A lot of that is grain that you feed to these animals. Animals then go and get slaughtered, and now you get to go buy them at your local supermarket. Well, now that the food prices have raised, and I certainly feel it when I go to the grocery store, that's because it's not necessarily they don't have it. It's the fact that they can't get it out of the country, even if they do. And they're starting to feel that in Iraq as well, on top of a lack of harvest for themselves just because of the drought. And as we move up here into the north, there was an explosion in Sulaymaniyah. Once again, I'm a lot better at Arabic than I am anything else, and I still can't pronounce it very well. But there was an explosion. We don't know what the cause of it, but currently 13 people are reportedly have arrived at the hospital in stable condition, with the exception of 2 who are currently under intensive care. We cannot verify what the cause was, but we do have some minor information coming out of here. Hopefully we can get some more clarification in the future. So, unfortunately, more tragedy currently going on there in Iraq. But Iran is seeing several types of developments today, with the biggest being very large anti-government and anti-inflation protests today. And these turned violent. So they are kind of a religious state. And so that's kind of where that's the government's kind of setup for them. And the instability of the region, the conflicts, the sanctions on Iran for different things, most notably their attempts to create nuclear weapons, continues to take an impact on their civilian population. Iran's also taken a lot of refugees in from different places such as Afghanistan and Syria, and it's really taken a toll. Now that food prices are increasing, and this is causing huge economic issues worldwide, Iran is still part of the global economy, and that means that they're seeing rapidly rising inflation in the country as well. And all of these things together do not make for very happy people. Let me take a look here.
بسیج کمدش لعنت بسیج لعنت به سپاه لعنت به خامنه ای نه خامنه ای کامپیوتراشو کولرشون نابود شدی بسیج نابود شد نابود 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 درود به مردم شهر جونقان مردم دلیر مردم شیرزاده خانزاده لعنت بسیج
So you got looting, riots, and protests, and just not a whole lot of good things for the government there in Tehran. From the photos that they were holding up, it seems like they aren't going towards really pushing that more towards the Ayatollah, who's a religious leader there in Iran, more towards kind of the standard government, it would appear, just from the looks of it, and kind of what we were hearing. So they're not targeting so far the Ayatollah, but more like the regular government there. But that's not the only news. Here in Taybad, which is right there on the border with Afghanistan, the military leaders of Iran and Taliban officials met there, and the two sides have reached an agreement to fortify the border. And this is in response to a lot of Islamic State attacks, and this we've seen in Afghanistan over the past several weeks has really caused major security concerns within the region. It's causing concerns globally as the Islamic State continues to conduct violent attacks globally. We're seeing a lot in Africa. We've seen them in the Philippines. We've seen them here in Afghanistan. They're targeting places that at least we haven't heard in a large amount about until now. Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan could easily become a target. Kyrgyzstan could become a target. Iran has had to deal with what appears to be Islamic State issues thus far. Pakistan, and that's only going to continue. Of course, we have all sorts of different news coming out of places like Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso. But that raises concerns because if they're hitting all of this region in the world, that doesn't mean that the northern hemisphere is cut off as well. That could those attacks could only bolster their willingness to carry out attacks in the West again, and that means the United States has a vested interest in Afghanistan, even now that the United States has pulled out, as do the rest of the coalition forces. There's still a vested security interest by many countries, and currently the neighbors are leading that charge. And there we have a photo regarding that ongoing meeting between the groups of officials there. And in Islamabad today, Pakistan and the Pakistani Taliban, also known as the TTP, have extended their truce, and this is because they're currently trying to come up with a peace agreement. So the Taliban aren't all just one group. If you live in a Western country, you only really know about the Afghani Taliban. Pakistan has its own sect of the Taliban, their own group, also known as the Taliban, who are fighting specifically with Pakistan. And while during the war in Afghanistan over 20 years, they did mutually support each other as they assisted each other across the borders there in Pakistan and Afghanistan up in the tribal regions. This doesn't necessarily mean that they are the exact same group. They are two separate groups with two separate objectives. But the truce, which was initially planned for the 10 days to celebrate Ramadan at the end there was only supposed to last until May the 11th, so yesterday. However, they're extending that truce until May the 16th. And this is so that the different tribes that are involved in the Pakistani Taliban are going to be able to come, hopefully, to some kind of a peace accord. So this is something that kind of already had started to negotiate a peace earlier, but they've failed to reach an agreement. But this new attempt is being made for the first time since the removal from power of Prime Minister Imran Khan, and now we have Sharif now in power there, and they're hoping that things may go a little bit differently with a new government in charge. So there is that official announcement regarding that truce. So very interesting information, that is for sure. However, a little more, the more stability in a region, the better. So if the fighting stops and people stop getting killed, I am all for that. And Sri Lanka has plunged into chaos. There is no better way to describe it. Protests continue in Sri Lanka. The court issued a travel ban for the former prime minister, who is also the brother of the president of Sri Lanka. And angry mobs are pulling people out of cars. They're killing people. There's robberies. They're hunting down officials and the wealthy. There are a number of, the number has exceeded 200 people killed. We were just talking about the other day where the protests had 7, and I believe that was yesterday. So this has escalated substantially, and these are those who are just accounted for by the state. That doesn't include the people that aren't even known to have been killed yet or are unaccounted for. So the country is plunged into what can only be described as chaos. Take a look here, some of the video footage.
No gas, no fuel, and various essential medications, and people are suffering, and the people are living with 1 meal per day. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I'm so sorry to say this.
And that right there is the Prime Minister, who did step down, but he is not permitted to leave the country. And as we can see here, his vehicles, of course, all of his fancy cars the Prime Minister had, including several Lamborghinis, are torched. Yeah, the people really are not fans of the two brothers whatsoever. The president refuses to step down. His brother at least did step down to try and quell some of the violence. That hasn't gone very well. He's currently in hiding in a safe house with the government. The military had to come in and take him away. So once again, as we can see, things have deteriorated quite significantly in the country of Sri Lanka, and I do not foresee the situation improving anytime soon. And as we move up to Chongqing, which is up here in China, an incident has occurred at the international airport there. A plane carrying 122 people on board rolled out of the runway and caught fire. 113 passengers and 9 crew members in total were aboard the aircraft, more than 90 people being injured and were hospitalized. This is coming from the airport. Despite having a world-renowned safety record over the last several decades, China has seen several different aircraft-involved incidents, including the downing of an aircraft due to unknown circumstances at this point, where there were no survivors. Luckily, the failure on this occurred on the runway, and hopefully there are no deaths. We do not have any reported deaths at this point in time, but that really starts to bring into question what Chinese aircraft safety is currently, if that tradition of good safety ratings continues to uphold as these incidents continue. And here in North Korea, a country that we haven't actually talked about very much here on the channel, North Korea has officially reported its first COVID-19 cases, and they reported their first case yesterday. That number has already gone up to 18,000 cases and 6 deaths as of today. So, first case yesterday, 18,000 today. This is of the Omicron variant, which is considered the most transmissive between people. And this is very interesting considering North Korea hasn't reported any thus far in the last 2 years. And he's continuing. Kim Jong-un continues to state this. We haven't had anything thus far, and the country's going into a lockdown, a countrywide lockdown. It's very hard for experts to believe that up until this point, they haven't had any cases. Granted, North Korea is very much an isolated country, and they isolated themselves even more so at the beginning of the pandemic. But this comes at the same time that South Korea and Japan both have reported that North Korea fired 3 short-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan, which is also highly concerning because these are tests that they weren't really supposed to be starting up, and North Korea is kind of pushing the boundary, trying to see how far they can. Lately, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, they've kind of been pushing to see, just how far can we go before someone says something. There's even questions as to whether or not they're prepping to conduct a nuclear test once again, which would be the first one in several years. So, a lot of interesting developments coming out of Pyongyang today. We'll have to see how that situation continues to unfold. But let's take a look here. North Korea says that 6 people have died. And once again, this is coming from the Associated Press, those ballistic missile tests. So, very interesting developments, indeed. Senator Rand Paul of the United States Senate has blocked the $40 billion aid package to Ukraine today, which has so far thus sparked several instances of pretty widespread outcries on social media. The senator from Kentucky had several statements to make today regarding this, and so let's take a look and listen here.
Passes. If this gift to Ukraine passes, our total aid to Ukraine will almost equal the entire military budget of Russia. And it's not as if we have that money lying around. We will have to borrow that money from China to send it to Ukraine. The cost of this package we are voting on today is more than the U.S. spent during the first year of the U.S. conflict in Afghanistan. Congress authorized force, and the president sent troops into the conflict. The same cannot be said of Ukraine. This proposal towers over domestic priorities as well. If this when going up and conducting interviews, this is what
the Secretary of State Antony Blinken had to say in a conversation with Rand Paul regarding talks on this package. So let's take a look.
It has not attacked NATO countries for probably a very good reason.
You could also argue the countries they've attacked were part of Russia.
Well,
or were part of the Soviet Union.
Yes, and I firmly disagree with that proposition. It is the fundamental right of these countries to decide their own future and their own destiny. And
I'm not saying it's not, but I'm
important.
saying that the countries that have been attacked, Georgia and Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union.
And that does not give
they were
Russia
part
the
of
right
the
to attack
Soviet
them.
Union since the 1920s.
But that does not give Russia the right to attack them. On the contrary,
No one's saying it does, but it
they were
really has
liberated
nothing to do
from being part of this empire by force. It has not attacked.
So those are the statements and the counter arguments for Senator Rand Paul regarding the $40 billion aid package to Ukraine being proposed to the United States Congress right now. And up in Alaska, Seward has declared a state of emergency. So Seward, Alaska is right here, way down here in Alaska. And there's really only one major road in which supplies actually flow into the city. And unfortunately, that road has been blocked by a very massive landslide that has covered that road and made it impassable. So supplies cannot come in or leave out of that city. So we can take a look here just at the immense landslide that occurred at this location. Take a look.
Holy shit.
Did you get that?
I'm getting it. That is fucking crazy.
That's going to take time to clear, and as you can tell, this isn't necessarily the most isolated part of Alaska, but Alaska is already kind of a sparsely populated location, and it's not exactly in the middle of civilization either. It's going to take time just to get the equipment there to clear that road, let alone the time it's going to take to actually do the work to clear it. They do have equipment nearby, but it may or may not be heavy enough, and they are going to have to probably bring more in. So obviously that state of emergency is going into effect regarding those concerns. And another thing to bring up is the fact Alaska has more pilots than anywhere else in the United States. I believe, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, there are more pilot's licenses in Alaska than there are actually driver's licenses. As an interesting tidbit there. But the nearest airport, the actual nearest landing strip, is here at the Seward Airport, which is before you even get to that main road. So, very concerning indeed. And finally, on our list here, the University of Florida, for the first time, has grown plants on lunar soil. So these are soil samples that were taken during the Apollo missions. And they sent a total of 12 grams of lunar samples collected from Apollo 11, 12, and 17 to their labs there at the University of Florida. And they were trying to see if they could, in fact, grow plants. This is the first time that they have been successful thus far to grow anything out of the celestial body. And so this is conducting experiments as we are actually planning on conducting yet another lunar mission towards the end of the decade. It'll be the first time since really the I believe the Apollo missions that we've even gone to the moon. And so this is going to help us understand some of the methods and things that will need to be done in order to, at some point, humanity is going to leave Earth and go out and spread and colonize. This is kind of the anticipated path of humanity to further expand into the rest of our, at least, known galaxy, or at least part of our known solar system. And this is, by many scientists, actually how humanity will survive in the long term. But to not get too far into that, a lot of experiments are being conducted and a lot of things are being studied right now. There's a lot of satellites going out, telescopes going out, studying a lot of this stuff in anticipation, as we're really on the cusp of a huge breakthrough when it comes to science and being able to, we're looking at lunar missions, Mars missions, we're looking at further missions, asteroid mining possibilities, as some companies are currently starting to kind of explore the possibility of conducting that. While some of this stuff could be even decades off, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen in our lifetime, and it would be significant breakthroughs if it did. So this stuff requires research, and this kind of stuff, being able to grow plants on lunar soil, means that there's a possibility of agriculture on the moon should we establish a lunar base there, because the moon's gravity is a lot less than that on Earth, and therefore if you were able to transport or if you were able to use less fuel and a big hurdle to the moon, and then launch a second ship from the moon to Mars and use the moon as a start off point, that would use less fuel, and that means more stuff such as food and equipment that you can pack for astronauts en route to Mars, for instance, or colonists, should that be a thing. So, and being self-sufficient on these kind of places would be very important, because resupply isn't always capable on these locations. So, very cool. So this is the article. These are the samples, in fact, here. You can see them growing out of the lunar soil there. So we know it can be done. We know it can be done. And they were close to 100% germination rate, which means 100%, nearly 100% of plants were able to successfully grow. And so we originally found this from CNN, but we do also have the actual study here regarding that. So very cool. It has a, while it may seem kind of primitive now, this is going to have huge repercussions for science as we go forward with going through and exploring our celestial neighbors. And with that, that is the end of the news for today. I hope that you guys found a lot of information pertinent, that there was a lot of stuff here that helps you understand what's going on in the world, and that I brought to light a lot of things that are going on that could really use our help, because we really want to be the news that gives back. We don't just want to give the news, we want to be able to give back to different places in the world, and we cannot do that without community support. So please check out the description in the video, and check out all of the different links. We've vetted them all, and you can give directly to these organizations and be ensured that the money that you donate is going directly to the people that need it the most. These are vetted to make sure, because unfortunately with tragedies going on worldwide, there are people who are scams, and we hate to see the tragedies such as Ukraine being used for that purpose. But in order for an effort to avoid that, we don't allow that kind of stuff to be posted, for instance, on our Discord, and we make sure that this kind of stuff is here so that way your money's going to get where it needs to be going. Finally, I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. I hope that you remain safe, that your family remains safe, and that your friends remain safe. Should they not be, I hope that you're able to find that safety and security here in the very near future. And please go ahead and join us on the Discord. Once, like I showed today, stuff that gets posted on there sometimes makes it into the stream. The community is awesome on there. And I'd love to see you guys on there. Come pick our brains. There's a lot of intelligent people there that have a lot of information. And can tell you a lot about what's going on in their sectors of the world and what's going on in Ukraine. And it's a very active community. I enjoy chatting on there. So come on, join us, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow. So my name is Paul from the New News, and I hope you guys have a great night. Talk to you later. Bye.